What if I told you the most dangerous piece of real estate on planet Earth right now is not in the Middle East? And it is not in Eastern Europe. It sits in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on an island smaller than the state of Maryland. And that island manufactures more than 90% of the world's most advanced computer chips. The same chips inside your smartphone, your car, and the fighter jets flown by the United States Air Force. China has spent the last decade building the largest navy on the planet. China's president has personally ordered his own military to be ready for an invasion within the next 12 months. And yet, day after day, nothing happens. No invasion. No missiles. No war. If that sounds like patience to you, stick around. Because what is actually happening in the Taiwan Strait right now is far more calculated than patience. And it could hit the American economy long before it ever reaches a battlefield. For more than 70 years, the People's Republic of China has called Taiwan a renegade province that must one day return to the motherland, by force if necessary. For more than 70 years, that invasion has not happened, not in the 1950s, when Mao Zedong's forces shelled the outer islands of Kinmen and Matsu almost daily. Not in the 1990s, when China fired missiles into the waters near Taiwan to punish an election it did not like. And not now, in an era when Chinese President Xi Jinping has built the largest navy on Earth, and has told his own generals to be ready for an invasion by the year 2027. That deadline is less than a year away, and yet almost every serious intelligence agency in the world, including America's own Office of the Director of National Intelligence, has concluded the same thing. China is very likely not going to invade Taiwan in 2027, so what is actually going on? If China has the missiles, the ships, and the stated political will, why is the invasion still just a threat on paper? The real answer has almost nothing to do with fear of American aircraft carriers, and almost everything to do with math, money, and the one thing every dictator fears more than losing a war: losing control at home. Let us start with the number that gets thrown around the most. 2027. In 2023. Then Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns revealed that Xi Jinping had ordered the People's Liberation Army to be ready to conduct a successful invasion of Taiwan by that year. Notice the wording carefully: ready to invade. Not planning to invade. That distinction is the single most misunderstood fact in the entire Taiwan conversation. A military deadline is not a political decision. It is closer to a fire department being told to have a truck ready at all times, not a signal that a fire is scheduled for next Tuesday. Xi wants the capability sitting on the shelf, loaded and available, so that if the political moment ever arrives, the option exists. That is not the same as pulling the trigger. Now let us talk about why pulling that trigger would be one of the most dangerous gambles any Chinese leader has taken since the founding of the People's Republic. Taiwan sits across a strait that, at its narrowest point, is still more than 100 kilometers wide. That water is not a highway. It is a graveyard for amphibious assaults. To successfully invade, China would need to move hundreds of thousands of troops, along with tanks, artillery, and supplies, across open water, under fire, while Taiwan's coastal defenses, mines, and missile batteries try to sink every ship in the convoy. Military planners who have studied this scenario for decades keep arriving at the same uncomfortable conclusion for Beijing. Even in the most favorable simulations, a Chinese invasion force would likely suffer catastrophic losses before a single soldier reached the beach, and that is before factoring in whether the United States, Japan, or other regional powers decide to intervene. This brings us to the second real constraint, and it is bigger than most people realize. China's own navy is not built the way people assume. The People's Liberation Army Navy does have more ships than the United States Navy. But raw ship count is a misleading statistic. Much of that fleet is made up of smaller coastal vessels designed to control nearby waters, not to project overwhelming force across a contested strait while also blocking outside intervention. Even China's newest guided missile destroyers, the Type 055 class, are reportedly being positioned in an air defense role to protect Chinese aircraft carriers from American air power. According to recent assessments from Western defense analysts, that is a defensive posture. Not the posture of a military supremely confident it can steamroll Taiwan and fend off Washington at the same time. Confidence in a fast, clean, low-cost victory is exactly what invasion planners lack right now, and without that confidence, no leader who wants to stay in power gambles everything on a single roll of the dice. Which brings us to the part of this story that almost never makes it into the headlines. Xi Jinping's biggest enemy is not sitting in Washington or Taipei. It is sitting inside his own military. Over the past several years, Xi has removed an extraordinary number of his most senior generals and admirals, through sweeping anti-corruption purges, including officers responsible for the very rocket forces that would need to spearhead a Taiwan campaign. Historians of authoritarian states will tell you something important here. A military mid-purge is a military Xi does not fully trust yet. You do not launch the most complex amphibious operation in modern history, using a chain of command you just gutted for disloyalty. Xi needs time to know that the generals beneath him will actually follow orders, and that the operation will not become the moment his own regime cracks open from the inside. Every additional year of purges is paradoxically another year of delay on Taiwan. Then there is the economy, and this is where the story gets almost too simple to believe. China's growth engine is slowing. Its official target for this year sits between 4.5% and 5%, the lowest growth goal since 1991. Chinese officials have raised defense spending by roughly 7% for 2026, a steady increase, but one that is actually slightly smaller than the year before. A war over Taiwan would not stay contained to Taiwan. It would trigger the most severe sanctions regime the modern world has ever assembled. Worse than anything imposed on Russia after its invasion of Ukraine, because China's economy is deeply woven into global trade in a way Russia's never was. Semiconductor supply chains, shipping routes, foreign investment, all of it would freeze overnight. For a Chinese Communist Party whose entire legitimacy rests on delivering prosperity to its own population, an invasion is not just a military gamble. It is a bet that could bankrupt the very system Xi has spent his career building. There is also a quieter tool sitting right next to invasion, one that Chinese strategists openly discuss as the far more attractive option: a blockade. Instead of storming beaches, China could simply surround Taiwan with its navy, coast guard, and air force, choking off shipping and slowly strangling the island's economy without a single tank ever landing on shore. A blockade is reversible. It can be escalated slowly, tested, and pulled back if the world reacts too harshly. An invasion cannot be undone once troops are committed. This is why so many of China's recent military exercises around Taiwan look less like invasion rehearsals, and more like blockade rehearsals, complete with Coast Guard vessels simulating inspections of ships entering Taiwanese ports. Beijing is building the tool it is actually more likely to use, and it is a tool that does not require winning a war in the traditional sense at all. None of this means the danger is fading. Quite the opposite. Taiwan's own government has grown alarmed enough to increase defense spending toward roughly 3.3% of gross domestic product this year, and its legislature recently approved a special budget worth close to $25 billion specifically to buy American weapons. But Taiwan's political system has its own obstacles. Opposition-controlled lawmakers cut that special budget by nearly 40% from what the government originally requested, and disagreements between Taiwan's political parties have delayed the island's ability to fund its own defense on schedule. In other words, even the country under the most direct threat is struggling to move fast enough. That should tell you something about how genuinely difficult and expensive real deterrence is, for everyone involved. Meanwhile, diplomacy has not vanished from this picture either. In May of this year, President Trump held a summit with Xi Jinping in Beijing, a meeting that took place while a massive Taiwan arms package was still being finalized in Washington. Great power leaders sitting across a table from each other, even amid enormous tension, is itself a signal. Nobody involved believes a shooting war over Taiwan is close, desirable, or currently winnable enough to risk starting on purpose. So if you want the real reason China has not invaded Taiwan, it is not a single reason at all. It is a stack of them, each one reinforcing the others. An amphibious assault across the Taiwan Strait remains one of the hardest military operations in the world, to pull off successfully. China's own navy still lacks full confidence it can defeat American intervention while also crossing that water. Xi Jinping is still rebuilding trust inside a military he has spent years purging. His economy cannot absorb the kind of global isolation an invasion would trigger, and a slower, reversible blockade offers most of the same coercive power without gambling everything on one irreversible move. The 2027 deadline is real. The capability being built is real. But capability and intention are two very different things, and right now every serious sign points to a Chinese leadership that wants Taiwan to fear invasion far more than it actually wants to attempt one. The moment that calculation changes, the world will know quickly. Until then, the most dangerous force in the Taiwan Strait may not be a fleet of warships at all. It may simply be uncertainty, deliberately kept alive by Beijing, because uncertainty costs nothing, and an invasion could cost everything.